So teachers all over the country are sounding the alarm bell that kids can't read these days.
What that say, Makai?
Piggy on.
It say what?
Piggy on.
Piggy on. That say piggy on. Boy, ain't no goddamn dog. Let me show y'all something. Now watch this. Let me show y'all something. What's this?
A pigeon.
This is a pigeon, right?
The numbers are alarming. Only about 33% of fourth graders can read proficiently. Now districts are taking a hard look at what went wrong and how they can reverse it. Our Rahima Ellis takes us to one.
You want to know why kids can't read? It's not because they're lazy. It's because we made reading optional in a world that's constantly screaming for their attention.
Don't shoot the messenger. I'm sorry, I didn't want to say it because I hate talking about these kids on here because I don't want them talking about me. But as a vast majority of students that I teach in my class do not know how to read, write, comprehend, critical think. They just cannot.
A teenager is standing in front of a classroom holding a card with one sentence on it. He looks at it. He knows every single one of these letters. He's seen all of these words before, and he can't make them open. 10 seconds go by. The room gets quiet in that specific way. A room gets quiet when everyone has realized the same thing all at once. He's 16, and he can't read the sentence that's in his hands.
She wore a sahalat of clothes that were extraordinary, whatever, bro, but somewhat gooch.
What does that mean?
She wore a lot. Bro, I don't know, bro.
You've probably seen the version of this by now because the internet turned it into a genre. A kid, a card, a stall. Gen Alpha can't read. Brain rot. iPad kids. The comments write themselves. Phones, TikToks, COVID, lazy parents. Pick your villain, leave your verdict, scroll on to the next. But here's the thing. He's not a little kid. A lot of them aren't. They're 16, they're 17, a year or two from voting, a year or two from signing a lease, a loan, a contract. And the question everyone is asking, what's wrong with this generation? I think that's the wrong question because to be 16 and unable to read a sentence on a card, something had to happen for a very long time, and nobody stopped it.
We cut recess and arts to chase test scores. We replaced libraries with laptops, then handed kids iPhones and apps built to keep them glued to a screen with endless 15-second clips and notifications. Entire corporations spend millions designing campaigns and algorithms to pull teenagers in and keep them scrolling because their attention is worth billions. We have ignored vocabulary, the building blocks of comprehension, and replaced real discussion with endless worksheets. And worst of all, kids do not see adults reading. If we are always scrolling too, why would they think reading matters? Reading is not just for scholars, academics, or students preparing for SAT, ACT, or CLT tests. It is the foundation of independence and opportunity, the skill needed to navigate contracts, college, and careers. If we do not rebuild a culture of reading, these million-dollar distractions will keep pulling kids away from the one skill that unlocks every other. So here is the question. Parents, educators, how will we compete for our kids' attention before it's too late?
Not the kid. The kid was 4 when this started. So the question isn't what's wrong with them. It's how does someone get all the way here and still move forward the whole time? This isn't really a video about reading. Reading is just a place where the problem finally came impossible to hide. The real story is that somewhere along the way, we built a world that became afraid of letting people fail. And we did it for the kindest reason you can imagine. The trouble is failure you're not allowed to experience is failure you'll never get to overcome. Let me explain to you how that happened. Slowly. The way it actually happened. Start with the easy questions because, they're not wrong. They're just late. Phones. Sure, the average kid's attention is split 100 ways before breakfast. COVID. Yes, a generation lost 2 years of the most foundational schooling there is, right when the basics were supposed to set. TikTok, iPads, autocorrect, a voice that reads everything out loud to you so you don't have to. All real, right? All part of it, right? But notice what every one of those explanations have in common. They're all about the last 10 years. And a 16-year-old who can't read didn't fall behind in the last 10 years. They fell behind in the first 6. Phones didn't make a 4th grader read at a 1st grade level. Phones showed up later and got the blame. The way the last person to walk into a messy room gets asked what they did.
For one, electronics. Children are put on a tablet, they're put on a TV screen, they have phones at the right age of 6 and 7. They don't read anything, they don't watch regular TV, they don't see commercials. They are glued to a screen 24/7 with instant gratification. They don't know how to be bored, they don't know how to use their imagination. In return, they cannot hold a conversation, which plays a part in reading and writing, whether you believe that or not. They cannot hold a steady conversation. They do not know how to be bored. They do not know how to use their imagination. They need something to constantly entertain them 24/7. So when they get in a school building and they're sitting in these seats right here, because they are not constantly entertained and constantly shown something to grasp their attention that they like, they cannot pay attention.
Here is an article published in The Atlantic called "America is Sliding Towards Illiteracy." Here's another one, America's Reading Crisis That No One Wants to Talk About. Some of these are blaming screen time and the tablet generation. Some of them are blaming AI or hypothesizing that it's going to get worse because of AI. Some are just blaming parents, right? We don't read to our kids like we should. But I think all of these fundamentally miss what's actually going on here, which is the incentive for reading. The only reason that many kids learn how to read is because they're forced to. If they're going to pass the test or if they're going to get a good score or whatever, they have to learn how to read. It's extrinsic motivation. We are trying to motivate them by saying, hey, if you do this, I will give you a gold star or a cookie. And that is not new. That is how I learned how to read. And I did not like reading at all. But I tried something different with my kids. It's worked really well. Instead of rewarding them for learning how to read, I taught them that the reward was actually the books that they get to consume now. Reading was not a means by which to be rewarded. It was the reward itself.
The pandemic is the clearest tell. Everyone assumed kids would bounce back when school reopened. Then schools reopened. And they didn't bounce back. Because the pandemic didn't create the gap. It just turned the lights on in a room where the gap was already standing there. So if the accelerants aren't the cause, what is? To find it, you have to go back to a question schools have been quietly answering for 40 years. And the answer felt like mercy. For most of the last centuries, school had a hard edge to it. If you couldn't keep up, you got left behind. Literally left behind. You repeated the grade. And that edge was brutal for a lot of kids. We should be honest about that. Holding a child back wrecked their confidence, marked them in front of their friends, and pushed a lot of them straight out the door. By the late 20th centuries, dropout rates were climbing, and a kid failing wasn't just a kid's problem anymore. It was starting to look like the country's problem. So the country did something reasonable. It decided to stop leaving kids behind. That's not a cynical sentence. Let me repeat that. Stop leaving kids behind. Who argues with that? It came from a real place from watching kids get written off at 8 years old and never recover. But here's where intention and incentives split up. Once a school could be punished for letting kids fail, failing a kid stopped being an academic decision and became a political one. A struggling student was now a number that made the school look bad, made the district look bad, made the state and the people running it look bad. And so every level of the system, quietly without anyone deciding it in a room, picked up the same instinct. Don't let the number go red. Everyone in the story was afraid of the same thing. Schools were afraid of bad scores. Administrators were scared of losing fundings. Politicians were afraid of looking ineffective. Teachers were pressured from above to move kids along. And parents? Parents were afraid of watching their own child struggle in a way that felt like a verdict on them. Nobody in that list is a villain. Every single one of them were trying to protect a child from harm. That's what makes it a tragedy instead of a scandal.
After she realized how many of her fourth graders could not read at grade level.
We were about 14% proficient.
14%.
Yes. So we knew immediately that we had to do something to make a change in our building.
The change was dramatic.
We were not explicitly teaching the components of reading.
The overhaul included retraining teachers, small group instruction, and tracking individual progress.
Consonant or vowel? Consonant.
They mostly left behind an approach commonly known as balanced literacy, adopted by many schools nationwide and facing growing criticism. It emphasized clues like pictures to understand a story and de-emphasized phonics. For example, in a picture book, if a line reads, "The sheep wakes up," the school says a child who's never seen sheep may say, "The dog wakes up." The child has the basic idea of an animal, but take away the pictures and the student struggles to read.
Pig.
Today, teachers here focus on the science of reading.
What's your prefix?
That includes explicitly teaching phonics, fluency, and sounding out words.
Because when everyone becomes afraid of failure, failure doesn't disappear. It just gets delayed very quietly. Year after year, pass forward to someone with less and less time to fix it. So picture what delayed actually looks like from inside a single kid's life. 3rd grade. They miss something foundational, the gap between sounding out a word and understanding a sentence. In a different era, someone stops here. They slow down, they catches it, but the number has to stay green. So they move up. 4th grade is built on 3rd, 5th on 4th. Every year is a floor laid top of the one before it, and there is a crack in it that nobody filled. By middle school, they've learned the most important survival skill the system accidentally teaches them. How to look like you're keeping up. Nod, copy, stay quiet, don't get caught on. And it works. It keeps working. They get handed forward grade after grade until one day they're handed something nobody can hand it forward through. Adulthood. The diploma, the cap in the air, the sad statistics. This is where almost every video about this stops. At the 18-year-old who can't read, like that's the tragedy ending. But that's not the ending. That's the part everyone can still see. The real story is what happens to that person next, when the cameras are gone and the report cards stop coming, and they walk out into a world that never checks again. Those kids who couldn't read the index card, they didn't disappear. They didn't get fixed either. They grew up. The viral clip is always a teenager because a teenager is still inside the one system built to notice. There's a teacher, a test, a worried note home. The whole machine is designed to catch a struggling kid. But nobody screens a 40-year-old. There's no report card for adults. So the problem doesn't get solved. It stops being visible. Because adults are extraordinary at hiding the things that they never learned. They memorize instead of read. They learn which menu item they always order so they never have to look at the board. They hand the form across the table. You fill this out. Your handwriting is better. They let the phone read it out loud and call it convenient. They build a whole quiet architecture around one thing they can't do. And they get so good at it that the people closest to them never finds out. A child who can't read is a crisis. An adult who can't read is a secret. And a secret can't be fixed because the first step to fixing it is admitting it. And they've spent 30 years learning that admitting it costs more than hiding it ever did. This is a thing the viral video almost touched and then they back away from. The same index card that proves a 16-year-old couldn't read. Hand it to that same person at 30, and the results, it doesn't change. The reading level never dropped. It just never set. And then a whole life got built on top of that. If you've ever been in a conversation that didn't quite add up, where the other person seemed to be working from a different page than the one in front of them, You may have been watching a workaround in real time and never known it. The failure, it didn't go away. It went underground. And underground is the one place we never look. So, how does someone get all the way there? There's a clean way to see it. Think about debt. When you advance a student who hasn't mastered the material, you don't erase the gap. You finance it. The kid carries a balance forward. The stuff they never learned, and that balance doesn't sit still. Every year the material gets harder and the interest compound. 3rd grade reading you skip becomes 5th grade. Textbooks you can't decode becomes 8th grade. Essays you can't write becomes a 10th grade. An index card that won't open becomes a 30-year-old who has never once in their life been out of debt. And here's the cruelest part of the math. By the time the bill comes due, the person holding it has the least power to pay it. A reading gap is fixable in 1st grade. Patient repetition, time. The same gap at 16 means going back to rebuild 6 years of foundation while sophomore year piles up in front of everyone while pretending you're fine. So they don't pay it. They can't. They do what any of us do when the bill is impossible. They stop opening the envelope. That's arithmetic. When trying, failing in public hurts more than quietly checking out. Checking out is the rational choice. At least it looks like a decision instead of a verdict. That's the debt. Now watch where it goes when the person carrying it has a child of their own. We keep asking why so many children can't read. But children don't teach themselves to read. And they don't raise themselves. The first place a kid learns words mean something is usually on a lap, at bedtime, a finger moving under a line on a page. It's the most ordinary thing in the world, and it's where reading actually begins, long before classrooms ever sees them. But you can't pass down what you were never given. And here's where it would be easy to make a mistake, to land on the parent and call it solved. To decide the real problem is just people who can't read raising people who can't read. But that's not a cause. That's the same delay, one generation later. The parent who can't sit down with the bedtime book isn't the reason why the system failed. They're the proof that it did. They were the index card kid. The thing that they can't give their child is the exact thing that nobody ever gave them. Not because they didn't love them, and not because their own parents didn't either, but because somewhere upstream, a gap got financed instead of fixed. And the bill just kept getting bigger and passed down the line. You've seen the version of this online. A parent upset about a child failing marks who writes the school a note, and the note has the same gaps in it. The internet treated it as a punchline. But it isn't a punchline. It's the loop closing. That parent was the index card kid 20 years on that was defending their child against a system themselves were quietly moved through, carrying a balance nobody ever helped them pay. So the debt doesn't compound across one life. It compounds across generations, handed gently, unknowingly with love from one person who never got to master it to another who now never will. And that's not a generation that failed. That's a generation that inherited a balance and is paying interest on a decision that nobody ever made on purpose. Reading was never really about books. Reading was the closest thing we built from borrowing another person's mind. A way for someone to figure out how to outlive them, to move from one generation to the next without getting lost. Maybe that's why this feels bigger than test scores, bigger than one clip of a kid in a card. Because we didn't lose this to phones or to one policy or to a generation that suddenly went soft. We lost it one small mercy at a time. Every adult in the chain trying to spare a child the sting of falling behind. But here's the thing about that sting. The failure we were so desperate to protect them from was never the permanent kind. It wasn't humiliation. It wasn't abandonment. It was the temporary kind. The kind that just tells you where the gap is. The kind that gives you something to actually overcome. And when a society becomes so afraid of watching someone struggle, that it removes the struggle entirely. It doesn't remove the failure. It removes the chance to master it. The kids are doing what kids have always done. They adapt to the world that they're handed. We just handed them one where you can keep moving forward without ever turning around to face the thing that you missed. So maybe the question was never what's wrong with them. Maybe it's that somewhere along the way, with the best intention everyone has ever had, we quietly misunderstood what it means to help someone. Thank you for tuning in with your girl, Remy. If you love what I'm putting out, like, share, and subscribe for more. And if there's a topic you would want for me to talk about, just drop it in the comment section below. Bye, guys.